Today on Locked On Canadiens, with Martin Necas being linked to the Habs several times, should they and can they trade for him, and more in our Friday mailbag.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1081 of your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. As you know, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. My name is Laura Sabo, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm joined as always by Scott Matla of Habs Eyes on the Prize. And Scott, are you ready for a Friday Habs mailbag that is very meaty? You're on mute.
My turn this time. I am always ready for the Friday mailbag. It is my favorite part of the week because it's where we can just kind of cut loose and do whatever we want in this case.
Whatever the listeners want.
Yeah, I guess they're important, I suppose.
Yes, so we've got a few questions about Martin Necas. So they're like, let me read them both. One of them we received on Twitter, and then one of them we received an email. The first question is, would you trade Matheson in a deal for Necas? And then the email question has a little bit more of a suggestion, the multiple suggestions. This comes from Greg. Hello, Lauren Scott. With all the talks of Necas and the Canes wanting a young established player, as per your May 29 episode, that with Beck, Waugh, Machar, and Kapanen, what would you think of trading Newhook and Harris for Martin Necas? First, it would make room for one of these kids. Second line could be Rod, Duck, and Necas. What do you think?
I think, one, they're not going to trade Alex Newhook at all. Kent Hughes traded a lot for this player, and they got part of a full season in here, and I don't think Kent Hughes is going to just go flip them right away, especially not, 23-year-old Alex Newhook, who I think they see as a big piece of this team here. And if we're talking young players, they mean guys probably on their entry-level contract or about to start like their NHL career here. So you're talking a guy like Joshua Waugh. You're talking potentially Owen Beck. Oliver Kapanen, I don't think gets it done in that deal there. But they're looking for guys who are just starting that career whose contract price is way, 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 way down there because as far as I could tell, Carolina's in a rough spot. They have $26 million in cap right now, but have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 forwards that are free agents this offseason, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 defensemen. And the thing about all of these, they are not going to be cheap pieces. Seth Jarvis needs a contract. Martin Necas needs a contract. Jake Gensel, UFA, would probably like to come back here. Jordan Martinook, Teuvo Teravainen, Brett Pesce, Brady Shea, they are going to need cheap, low-tier contracts at that point. And I don't think one Newhook would be given up by the Canadiens, and he's already making not a huge chunk of change, but maybe more than I think they might want in there. It's only $2.9 million, so it is entirely possible for that, but I can't see it being the case for Carolina at this point. Jordan Harris, I could absolutely see being a piece of that, seeing as he's, not making a ton. He makes $1.4 million this upcoming year. I could see him being a piece in this trade, absolutely, along with pretty much anyone in this defensive group, if we're being quite honest.
Including Matheson, because one of the questions specifically was, would you let him go for that?
This is where it gets hard because I look at this Canadiens defense without Michael Matheson and my blood runs cold. I love Lane Hudson. I love David Reinbacher. I love a lot of the young players in this defensive group. I don't see any of them as able to supplant Mike Matheson on the Canadiens blue line at this current point in time.
And let's stay kind of on that train for the second half of this segment. Other than Trevor Zegras and Martin Necas, who is a potential top six forward you would like to see on the Habs? And then somebody says, the same person says, you need to answer your DM, Scott. I'm guessing there's a question in there somewhere.
I've stopped looking at my DMs on Twitter because it's been mostly just P-bots
Spam.
and spam.
Yeah. Okay. So thoughts on other than Zegras and Necas, like who's a young forward we'd like to add? Doesn't necessarily need to be someone who like is rumored to be traded or linked to the Habs, et cetera, et cetera. Just don't say Kotkaniemi because even when we joke about that, people get really angry.
Well, no, they also said top six forward too. So
All right.
not to be too mean, but to be just a little bit mean. And Jay, I'm sorry about this, but I'm already kind of turning my head over towards Columbus, maybe.
Ooh.
And in there, Kent Johnson is a name that floated around in some really bad trade proposals in the beginning of last year. And besides that, I also look at Patrick Laine, who is going to be a lot more expensive at $8.7 million per year for the next 2 years. He's 26 years old. He will and spent part of his year in player assistance this year, had some injuries and everything, but everything about this screams this player needs a fresh start. And if Columbus is really looking to start over, Don Waddell now as GM, I don't know if Pascal Vincent is going to stay as their general manager. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking Patrick Laine is one of those guys that you can absolutely buy low on, with the caveat of that being, well, you got to get rid of like Josh Anderson on there. We already have one guy whose one trick is scoring goals and not playing defense. Only Anderson's a little bit more physical, skates a little bit more. Necas, I think, is going to be the one that everyone's focused on. I would be interested also in Anaheim. Talking to Ducks fans, some people have kind of been like, if Troy Terry goes, our feelings aren't hurt too badly.
Do we want Troy Terry?
I'm not opposed to it, but he is signed. His contract ends in 2030, making $7 million a year. So he'll be in his early 30s when that contract ends. It's hard to judge, how good he is because Anaheim's kind of been a tire fire, but I'm not opposed to the idea of it. I think he'd be a perfectly fine top six add to this team, but I don't think he hits that same excitement level that people are getting with Trevor Zegras. And understandably so, Trevor Zegras is just a different kind of person, but Terry's contract is locked in. Zegras is going to need a new one after the end of the 2026 season. And if he hits the ground running in Montreal, that 5.75 he's making now is going to go up exponentially. And it makes me worry a little bit about whether or not they can afford him. Some people said Mason McTavish. I think that just the ask for that alone is going to have Pat Verbeek hanging up the phone in their faces.
I mean, I would call about Mason McTavish. I don't think anyone's going to be listening on the other end. Like you said, they'll hang up the phone. But guess what? Everyone's tradable for a price. Like the price will be steep. So you never know. And also sometimes I have a lot of confusion about what Anaheim does. I just sometimes I'm like, what are you doing? That doesn't really make sense. But it seems to for whatever reason, they seem to be really convinced with their vision.
And here's the thing is that they've built a really good prospect pool in there, so it's hard to argue with them on that. It's just sometimes they do things that I'm like, why are you playing Ross Johnston? Why did you pay Alex Killorn that long? Why X, Y, and Z? And I'm just kind of working my way through the Western Conference here, and I'm not seeing a lot of teams where I'm like, I want pieces from that. Vegas is very old and is very expensive right now. They have one regular NHL forward under 25, and it is two, Brendan Brisson and Pavel Dorofiev, and I definitely butchered that. And my thought with that is I don't think either of those fit into the top six immediately this year. So I am looking, I think, at Anaheim and potentially Columbus as the teams I might be looking to steal pieces from in that.
And I absolutely agree. In the meantime, we have plenty more mailbag questions. And up next, we're going to talk a little bit about goaltending, goalie projections, et cetera, et cetera. And that is coming up in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Let's talk about the NBA playoffs and how hard it is to get tickets sometimes to things. And you know what? Getting tickets shouldn't be this hard. Gametime is here and they have such an easy app, to use. They have so many different features that make it easy and painless to get tickets. You can get views from your seat, for example, and their pricing. It's, there's no hidden fees. You've got a feature to do that. They've got last minute zone deals, they've got flash deals, and sometimes you can save up to 60% off buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy. I know we're talking about NBA playoffs, but honestly, it could be anything, any kind of event that's in your city. Gametime will have it. So you should take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets or any kind of tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Scott, we've got a couple questions about goaltending. You weren't here for this for the Monday episode, but last week in our Nepo Baby show, I know we got caught up in the emotion of our first segment. We forgot that Caden Primo was a Nepo Baby. And I think it's also because we were looking at like draft eligible players or like last year's draft players where it was like Nepo Babies, but we already have one of the Nepo Babies in our system / on our team now, I guess. But goaltending of the future. So we got a couple of questions about Jacob Fowler. And in your estimation, Scott, how long do we think it will take for us to actually see him at the NHL level? And what is your prediction as to, from these three goalies, which two will be remaining on the Montreal Canadiens, let's say 3 years from now?
So I think for Jacob Fowler, I think you could potentially see him in the NHL as soon as the end of this upcoming season, depending on how deep Boston College goes. I think he's going to go the Caden Primo route where he has won so much inside those couple of years that he just wants to get to that next level. I don't think he's going to stick as an NHL goaltender potentially going into the next year. I think that'll be up to, whoever else is in there. Jakob Dobish will be here. You might have Quentin Miller, Evgeny Volokin, whoever else they might draft or sign or trade for, whatever. And then also Caden Primo, who is in the last year, this year of his current contract. Montembeault obviously extended. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see him play at least a game or two in the NHL at the end of next season. And I think he will absolutely be pushing for a full-time roster spot going into that next year there. And I think he has all the tools to absolutely do so. What that looks like in 2 years is all dependent on, does Samuel Montembeault continue his progression as solidified NHL starter? Or is this going to be, flash in the pan? Yeah, this is what he is. And I don't know what Jakob Dobish's ceiling is right now. I thought he bounced back, had a very strong AHL rookie season, but he's raw in a lot of aspects of his game where I think Jacob Fowler is a little bit more polished. I think this is the last year of Caden Primo in Montreal, and I do think that they will look to potentially make that trade at the deadline because as we've learned in the playoffs this year, sometimes teams just need a quality backup goaltender. We don't fully know if that's Caden Primo yet or not because he alternated lights out and AHL backup with regularity this year. A couple of good games, then a really stinky one, then a decent game, then a stinky one, and back and forth. This is the hardest position, I think, for me to predict because goaltenders are complete voodoo.
They are.
I look at Caden Primo in the AHL, one of the best, most solid goalies. It took him 4 years, I believe now, to find his footing as an NHL backup, not a starting quality goaltender. And this is one of the best goalies that played in the NCAA recently. We've seen very good goalies not even get offered NHL contracts, not be drafted, and they go off and play in Europe. And I keep flashing all the way back to Hayden Hawkey, who was playing at Providence, was a phenomenal NCAA goaltender. Canadiens traded him with picks to, I believe it was Edmonton, or maybe it's Calgary. They traded him in something, and he's just bounced around the ECHL with maybe an AHL cup of coffee. It's a position that does not lend itself to being easy to understand, and I'm hoping Jacob Fowler comes as advertised at this next level as well.
So I didn't interrupt, but you mentioned, you think that this might be the last year that we see Caden Primo in Montreal, and he might get traded away at this deadline. So in that scenario, are you then seeing the Samuel Montembeault remaining, and then Jakub Dobiš making the sort of jump, and then Jacob Fowler trying to be the guy in the AHL?
I could see it very easily as, and here's the thing is, Primo could come out this year and be
Dominant.
a certified starter.
Right.
Who knows? I could see them also at the deadline being, especially if this is, hey, we're far enough out that we're not going to make the playoff run. We're going to sell pieces off and just do the best we can for the rest of the year. And just be like, we'll give you a 6th round pick to take this, backup veteran off your roster that you're not using so you can do other things if you want to, or as part of a bigger trade, whether that be David Savard, Yoel Armia, etc. I could see them just getting a quality, just a guy to back up Samuel Montembeault from now and then. And if he gives up 4 goals in a game and they lose, it doesn't matter. He's going to be a UFA at the end of the season. It's almost like when they got Andrew Hammond, just to be a guy as the backup there. Because I do have to keep reminding myself, Jake Allen is no longer as part of this organization. He's with the Devils, and we are cheering for that 2nd round pick condition to hit. I think that there's enough potential goaltending situations that the Canadiens could very easily, just if they decide to move Primo, just get another guy from another team just to help be the nice guy and help alleviate some of that situation there. And then Fowler can come in at the end of the year, and if you scratch the veteran guy, who the hell cares? You're not trying to win these games. Put Jacob Fowler in and see what he's got. And then next year in training camp, you let all the young guys battle it out. Prove that you belong here. Prove that you can be the NHL backup. If not, the AHL is also just right there, and that's not the end of the world.
Right. And then really quickly before our next segment, I'm going to summarize about 15 different questions here. We've got a faction of people saying Trevor Zegras is overhyped. Why does he keep coming up with as a Habs trade target? And then we've got another bunch of listeners saying that he should be a Montreal Canadiens trade target. What are your thoughts, Scott?
My thoughts are he has all the skill in the world and would be a humongous asset to the Canadiens potentially. I also think that some people who think that he is all flash and no sizzle behind that could be a problem, especially in the playoffs. I think that we don't know because he hasn't had a chance to be on a playoff team.
God love Anaheim.
Yeah. And I know that Cole Caulfield is good friends with him. I think that adding him is doing what everyone wants the Canadiens to do. Take a bet on high upside. And right. Trevor Zegras is absolutely that.
But my question also is, why does this has been coming up for like the past 2 years? Like it's the past 2 seasons. Is Anaheim so ready to give him up?
I don't think so. I've actually asked some Ducks fans about this, and they're blaming Frank Saravalli for this because he's the one who kind of got this whole steam train started for whatever reason. And maybe he's heard something. Maybe he's making it up. Who knows? It could just be maybe the culture fit isn't there. And that despite, wanting to keep this player there, just things don't mesh. And sooner or later, you have to figure out, am I keeping the one or am I keeping the everything else that fits in this? And sometimes if you have a truly elite all-world player that can take over the game on his own, you make the decision to build around them. And sometimes you go, we're going to probably take a net loss on this, but how much can we recoup in a deal for this? And I think Anaheim, who could probably get a king's ransom if they say, yes, he is available, because they will have, I'm sure, most teams knocking on their door.
Right.
Including Carolina, who might, be like, we'll give you Martin Necas and whatever for Zegras and whatever. And that's the base of a trade that the Canadiens, without blowing up their prospect pool, couldn't match.
Right. There you go. And that would be like a guy for guy, essentially. They could throw in picks or prospects or whatever, but that would be a guy for guy trade. Well, not like a rando guy, but you know what I mean. All right. In our next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about projected defense core and then this really fun exercise that one of our listeners had us do. And that is coming up in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. All right, Scott, let's talk about it. Actually, I want to do the decor one first. And this one comes from our very good friend, Claude S., who is basically responsible for all of our content for the last week or so. Just for fun, suspending reality for a moment and assuming the scouts are right and all of these players reach their full potential, do you think the Montreal Canadiens can win the 2026-2027 Stanley Cup? So this is 3 seasons away. We're doing 24-25, 25-26, 26-27, right? So 3 seasons away, right? With the projected D core below. Adam Engstrom, Caden Goalie, Lane Hutson, David Reinbacher, Arbor Jacki, Logan Mailloux. As a group, I think they cover all the bases, capable of handling the power play, penalty kill, and the physicality needed in the playoffs. What would the top 6 be in your Shangri-La?
This is
Do you want me to
hard.
repeat the player?
No, I've got the 6 players there. One, I do think that for this to work, a Hudson Reinbacher pairing is instrumental, I think, in being what I think would be my top pairing there. And then right behind that, this is where it gets difficult because they have a lot of guys who can start moving the puck and a lot of guys who also might have some defensive deficiencies, Caden Goalie notwithstanding. And in there, and people are going to yell and scream in the comments, I think Jaden Struble, depending on how this offseason goes, could supplant Arbor Jacki in this lineup as a regular because of his physical talents, his defensive awareness, his skating. He doesn't have that same high-level pugnacity that Jacki does. I think that Struble is plenty physical on his own, but he's a new age defensive defenseman in the way that he plays. I would very much have him in my lineup as well. Logan Mailloux, I think, is going to be he's one of the few guys that I could see them making a case for a 2 defenseman power play with Lane Hutson as a rover and Mailloux as the actual shooting option, but also even as a power play 1 or power play 2, just Shea Weber type of guy there. If they all hit their ceiling, and I think Adam Engstrom comes in second, third pairing guy, Jacki second, third pairing guy, Mailloux first pairing offensive upside, maybe not the highest defensive upside, but Reinbacher and Hudson definitely have first pairing upside. Goalie as a high 2, if everything goes well, I think they could make that work, but I think they would potentially need to splash out for a veteran in there. Someone, and I'm imagining, upgraded Brett Kulak, like prime Jeff Petrie kind of thing there to really tie that all together, because that's still a very young group for the most part, but I think that they could do a lot of damage. The defense has never been so much my concern if the goaltending is holding up. It's the forward group that is a mystery in a couple of years here, because we have guys like Doc and Newhook, et cetera, who are going to be coming up for contracts too, and we don't know what those seasons are going to look like yet.
I absolutely agree. Okay, so then we have like a fun question. When I say I absolutely agree, I mean my brain cannot do the math of like what all these players are going to cost. So I'm going to think about that. This comes from our good friend Kyle R. And the subject line said, "Please don't laugh too hard." And this is how it started. "Hi, Laura and Scott. My genius self heard you say superlatives and thought, oh, yay, we're making up Habs expletives. Jesus Christ, was I wrong. I can't believe I slapped that up that badly. Can you guys think of any fun family-friendly expletives that we can drop in front of the kids when the game doesn't go the right way and we want to scream something the complete opposite of "Yuppie"? So, Scott, family-friendly, let's say exclamations that have to do with the Habs.
This actually was a struggle for me because anyone who's watched a game around me or been in a live stream with me watching a game knows that that's not the way that I go with anything at that point. I'm
not allowed near kids during a Habs game, Scott.
Wait, what now?
I'm not allowed near children during a Habs game because of my swearing.
Oh, I almost said something that was going to end this podcast prematurely and everything. So, I in the back of my mind, the first thing that came up was just what the Bork, in tribute to meme legend Rene Bork, not Rocket Captain Gabriel Bork. This is hard because like I've slapped this up, which negative connotation, but like it still works. This was way harder than I thought, and I've thought about this for most of the day.
I know, right?
It's because I just combine a bunch of player names with an expletive, and then it doesn't really work. I was like, I could do Goalie, and I'm like, nope, can't say that word on this podcast, and it's definitely not family friendly.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just be like, what the bleep, Josh Anderson, because he's going to be signed forever. It's like, this is hard.
I know.
Like, Jesus Price has always been a good one because it just worked out so well.
Yeah, and it was like not rude. I wanted to like something like I used to say, for Koivu's sake, or in the name of Koivu, or that kind of stuff. For the love of Koivu, what are you doing?
For the love of Maurice, what are you doing?
Yes. For the love of Maurice, what are you doing? Just things like that. Like, and then I had this really mean one, and I'm gonna say it, but I'm gonna like, I'm gonna feel bad about it forever. But like, I was just gonna say you really joshed that up.
God.
And it's mean. I know it is.
It's not wrong though, because every time we watch Josh Anderson try to do anything that isn't skate forward, it's like it's the Simpsons joke of just hold on. He's gonna do something stupid. And then lo and behold,
he does.
He just joshes it up all over the place, and the puck's going the other way, and I'm over here losing my hair further on everything else. So
and then, I mean, the easiest one is Kirby Duck, right? Like, he's got a name that, like, just lends itself to, like, you say duck you, or, like...
you and I went into very different directions, and I don't know what that says about me as a person.
And then I think the age-old thing is, like, people will go, like, are you blind, ref? Like, I think that, you refed it up. I think that's a great way to, that's a great way to express our feelings.
I was trying to make fun of one of the officials by name, and I'm just like, Chris Lee. Calling someone Chris Lee, I feel like is the meanest thing I can do if I'm not referring to Sir Christopher Lee.
You are the Christest of Lees. How about that?
Well, no, they'll never see it because they're going to miss that in the first place, like all the calls that he misses on the ice. So we do want to hear what your Habs expletives would be.
That's a fun exercise. Like, I think I want to do a regroup when we've had time to think it up, and like, maybe we ask our buddy Ian too. Like, he's got some good ideas. He's very creative about this kind of stuff. So you tell us, and in the meantime, we're going to end this mailbag now and let you guys get on with your weekend. We will be back on Monday. So make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. We're free and available literally everywhere, 5 days a week. And we've got so much draft content. We took a little break from it this week, but we'll get so much draft content back for you next week. In the meantime, you can find us on Twitter at LO_Canadiens. You can email us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. Please do. We love your emails. You can find Scott all over social media at Scott Matla. You can find me all over social media at The Active Stick. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great weekend, and we will see you Monday.